But when it comes to architecture, it means that in our design, engineering, and building practices, we can greatly influence and directly affect the environment. Our designs will affect the environment, so we can either literally destroy the environment in the process of building, or we can help the environment, or we can at least mitigate our impact to some extent.
This is Christine Medvedev, a registered architect in Ohio, discussing sustainability. Listen to what she says is the big idea as it relates to this important concept.
The resources that we're using on planet Earth are not what planet Earth is regenerating every year. So we are using it's 3 or 4 times as much as the Earth is regenerating every year. And that might have changed. I think that book is about 20 years old now, so It could be more or less at this point. But if you think about that fact, that's the big idea, is that the Earth is producing X every year in natural resources. Trees, the availability of fresh water, gases that are underground, et cetera. The animals that we eat, the plants that we eat. And what do we consume as humans every year? It's a multiple factor of what the Earth is producing. So that by itself, that's the big idea about why we have to be sustainable. That is not sustainable. We cannot continue to do that in perpetuity.
I'm your host, Mark Good, and this is Remarkable, a podcast focused on people and stories worthy of your attention. And now, today's show. Welcome to another episode of my Remarkable podcast. And today I have my guest, Christine. And Christine, please pronounce your last name for me, because I have said that incorrectly before.
My name is Christine Medvedev.
Medvedev,
yes.
Okay, there's an emphasis on that second syllable.
Exactly, Medvedev. Plenty of people say Medvedev, and that is also fine. Any version of that is perfectly acceptable.
Okay,
yes, even my mother-in-law would say either one is acceptable.
All right, well, that's wonderful. Well, welcome to the show today. You. Well, please, for people who don't know you, and that's probably most of the people who are listening to the show today, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. All right. I'll try to give you the brief rundown here. So I'm an architect. So I'm licensed in 2 states, Ohio and New Jersey at the moment. Yeah. So architecture is my profession, but it's also my passion. It's my entire career. It's my first, middle, and last career. Sustainability is a huge part of that.
Okay.
I know we'll talk about this maybe separately, Mark, but, it's something I've known I wanted to do since I was, 10 or 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in architecture, in my career, sustainability has always been important. It has not always been important to all architects, but just in the time frame that I started practicing, it became it has become the industry standard. Now some practice more sustainability than others, and not all architects are certified in sustainability consulting, which there are various types, one of which is LEED, which I know we'll talk about.
But before we go too far, the word sustainability is used a lot. It's like thrown into conversations frequently.
Yes.
And help us, just for those of us who are not registered architects, and who don't understand sustainability as framed by an architect, what that actually means.
So I'll define it specific to architecture. But when it comes to architecture, it means that in our design, engineering, and building practices, we can greatly influence and directly affect the environment. Our designs will affect the environment, so we can either literally destroy the environment in the process of building, or we can help the environment, or we can at least mitigate our impact to some extent. So sustainability is something that has to be embedded within our designs. It truly has to be established even before any design starts. It should be established before a site is selected for a building. It also should come from the client, ideally, rather as an architect who primarily does residential work at this moment in my career. It does not always come from my client, and that's okay. I always tell my clients that I will incorporate it as much as I can, and I will keep them informed as much as they want to be.
Right. Okay, so let me pull on this thread a little bit because it's interesting to me when you frame it as you have. For years, and I'm talking now principally European civilization, so going back to, let's say, medieval Europe, and then as Europeans settled, conquered the North American continent, right? The attitude that many people had when they were coming to an area that at least was not populated by Europeans. There may have been Native Americans there may have been others there, or it may have been like Ohio was in 94, when I think his name was Moses Cleveland, led the team that landed on today what is Cleveland, right, off the Lake Erie, at the junction of Lake Erie and the Cuyahoga River. The attitude by many Europeans was that we needed to conquer the land. We needed to dominate, which is actually, there's a biblical notion of having dominion, right? So the idea was the land is to serve my interest, right, as a settler, right, as a resident, a commercial, right? So I'm going to clear the trees. I'm going to make fields, right? I'm going to do all this stuff. And without regard to any long-term consequences, it was simply what serves our needs as sort of conquering settlers, right? We're going to pour concrete. We're going to do, this sort of just almost rapacious view of the land is just ours to take and do with the what we will. I'm getting kind of animated about this, but it's, I've seen so many examples of that. What happened? Why did people, I don't want to say all of a sudden, but why was there a change to the point of view that you've articulated, which says, wait a minute, we need to work with the environment. We need to at least mitigate our impact. What happened?
So I would push back on that, push back on the premise just a little bit.
Okay.
In that, yes, that may have been the point of view of specifically explorers who came to the New World and saw this as their land to exploit. Both the people who were there already, the flora, the fauna, the resources, etc.
Right.
But throughout history, our humans' practices on the land have not been as detrimental to the environment as they are now until the Industrial Revolution.
Okay. Interesting. Great
So
point.
until we started burning coal and driving cars, essentially, and, producing diesel to ship things around the world, our relative impact on the environment was small.
Okay.
If you look at how people were living, they were living in dense communities. They were walking. They were growing their own food. They had a few farm animals, and they were doing things in a communitarian way that was proportionately had very little impact on the environment relative to now.
Good point. No, great point.
So Industrial Revolution and the what hits the fan environmentally.
Right.
I think in the architecture field, I will give architects a little more credit than kind of the broader population. Maybe I have more faith in architects. I don't know. And that I think we've always been a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of sustainability. And we've always tried to incorporate it a little more into our practice than our clients even potentially demanded. The research has, I think, only relatively recently been available to show what humans are doing to Earth.
Right.
And there is an incredible book called The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard. And I think she also did a children's version, potentially. I think there's even like a YouTube series about it now.
Right.
But that was the first book that I had read, or sort of the first time that I had access personally to the information that showed the resources that we're using on planet Earth are not what planet Earth is regenerating every year. So we are using it's 3 or 4 times as much as the Earth is regenerating every year. And that might have changed. I think that book is about 20 years old now, so It could be more or less at this point. But if you think about that fact, that's the big idea, is that the Earth is producing X every year in natural resources. Trees, the availability of fresh water, gases that are underground, et cetera. The animals that we eat, the plants that we eat. And what do we consume as humans every year? It's a multiple factor of what the Earth is producing. So that by itself, that's the big idea about why we have to be sustainable. That is not sustainable. We cannot continue to do that in perpetuity.
That's a very interesting point, because
unless we go to Mars and live there.
Right, which Elon Musk would love. That's a very interesting point. I came to this interview thinking, and we will probably get to this, to talk about, climate change, global warming, and the impact on sustainability. But you've actually turned the focus a little bit to say, Mark, it's a lot about consumption, right, in terms of limited resources that we have on this planet and the degree to which we are consuming them faster than their renewability.
Right.
And the adverse impact that has, quite frankly, on future generations, right? It's going to impact our children, our grandchildren, and their children, right? Which is really frightening when you think about it. So sustainability is something that really seeks to address that idea. So tell me how that then works its way into an architect's mind in terms of, you're a residential architect, and let's assume, although this is not true where we're recording this today, there's not a lot of empty lots, but let's say somebody said, hey, Christine, I'd like to hire you to design a new home, a residence, right?
Well, I would just jump for joy, first of all. I'd say, great, let's do it. Yeah. There are so many things to consider. If the client had already picked that site, of course, we're going to, I am a paid consultant, essentially, and do I design people's homes for free? No, unless I do a lot of community and nonprofit work. Designing someone's home would generally not fit into that category. So if the site is chosen, the first step is really an exploration of the client's goals. And this is before any sort of design comes into play. The client doesn't always know what their goals should be or know how to define them. So I would put my sustainability consultant hat on.
Okay.
And I would do an exploration just around sustainability first. And again, this is assuming that the client comes to me with that as a priority. Oftentimes that's not the case, right? They just say, build me a home, not make me a sustainable home.
Again, let's explore that as a sort of a juncture or a vector. So we've got an A and a B case here. So the A case is somebody just says, Christine, I want you to design me a home, and never brings up sustainability, or maybe is even oppositional. Maybe says, I don't care about that, right? Okay,
sure.
So that's design A. Design B is when they said, no, sustainability really is important. You've educated the client. They go, wow, you're right. That really matters. What are some of the differences that would become apparent between the non-sustainable design and the sustainable design? What are some of the things we'd see?
So the sustainable home would have that be incorporated right from the start. It would probably be, it would be something to celebrate, actually. So it would probably be things that you can see. When you walk up to the property, you would see things like native plantings.
Ah, okay.
You would see materials that maybe they look more natural than others. So there would probably be a visual component at first.
Okay.
When you entered the home, there would be things that you do not necessarily notice in addition to some visual cues. So the air would be clean and maintained.
Within the home.
Within the home.
Interesting.
there's so many different ways to achieve sustainability within the home. So one of the ways that if I were building a new home,
Right.
especially here, energy efficiency would be key.
Okay.
If you think about how we heat and cool homes,
Right.
we're basically burning coal for electricity to heat, to sometimes heat if we have electric heating, and to cool our homes. So one of the ways that people achieve the energy efficiency is by building what's called a passive house.
Oh, yeah.
And that means that essentially it's a super insulated house where you control the amount of air coming into and out of the house, and you have to mechanically ventilate air coming in and out of the house. It's called makeup air. So if you seal the envelope of the home so tightly and it allows no air in, you have to then bring some air in mechanically just to have enough oxygen inside the home to breathe. That's not something you ever think about, for an older home.
That's fascinating.
An older home, like my home is from 1908. There's so much air coming in and out of that house, every day. We could seal it up for a year and still breathe fine.
Finally, I met somebody that has a home older than we do. Our home is 1918.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So 10 years older. So yes, breathability is not an issue with her home. It's breathing all the time.
Right.
So a passive home, then, you've locked that down.
Right.
You're controlling the air that comes into the home.
Exactly.
Ensuring there's enough oxygen.
Right. And then you have to make sure that what is inside the home is essentially clean and not off-gassing. You also
what is off-gas?
Sorry,
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Using technical terms.
That's fine.
I guess off-gassing is materials that have sometimes a perceptible or it could be imperceptible smell. So it's literally and a smell is particulates in the air. So off-gassing is literally putting out a smell, which is particulates into the air. And usually any type of plastic does this.
Right.
You can very much experience this. You open up a new package of something, right? And the smell that you get is off-gassing.
Interesting.
Now, most materials, and even for a project that we do, which is if it's achieving a certification, or if or if we do just have sustainability in mind, many times for example, let's say there's a package of tile that comes in. There's 5 pallets of tile. We will literally open those 5 pallets of tile outside just to let that initial off-gassing happen outdoors. Yeah. So once you leave it there for a certain amount of time, and then you bring it inside.
So a home designed by you doesn't have that new home smell.
Ideally, it should not. No, that's right.
Because
and
truly,
new car smell, new car smell.
Yeah, that's off-gassing.
And it's off-gassing, and mostly what you would think of, what you're sensing there would be the paint. Actually.
Right.
So paint, there are many, many great options when it comes to paint these days. You want to look for what's called low VOC. VOC is volatile organic compound. It's a fancy word for the particulates that are in the air, that occur with this off-gassing. So Sherwin-Williams has great products. Benjamin Moore has great products. You can probably even get some products at Home Depot that just literally by the paint on your wall can have a smell and can be unhealthy for you. So when you're doing something like a passive house and you seal that envelope, the paint that you put on the walls is super important. Everything's important. The glue, the mortar holding tile, every product, every piece of furniture.
So this
is very important.
So this passive design,
yes.
First of all, it has one objective, which is maintaining the home's, we call it the HVAC kind of envelope, the quality and the heat of the air, right? But this other part, the off-gassing, is really for the safety and the comfort of the residents, correct?
It is, absolutely.
Yes. It's not so much that it lowers or raises my heating bill, the off-gassing. The off-gassing is about my personal health.
It is, but they do affect each other. So if you have products that are off-gassing, you need more airflow into and out of the house. If you need more airflow, you're using more energy, or frankly, opening windows, which is wonderful, but you would only do that when it's a certain temperature outside, right? And we're in Ohio, so you can't be opening your windows in the middle of the winter to, air out your stinky carpet, let's say.
Right.
Or whatever it may be.
Fascinating. Okay, so
yes, and this is, by the way, one type of sustainability for homes, the passive house design. There are certifications for that. I'm not an expert in passive house design. It's fascinating to me, though, and I have worked on projects that are doing that, not as the architect of record, but there are many other ways that we can incorporate sustainability into homes.
How about one of the things that I first heard about years ago would be a solar passive home where I'm controlling the radiant heat that's entering the home by biasing where I put my windows and doors openings.
Yes. That's part of passive house design. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more of just a way to be more specific.
Okay.
But that's part of the passive house design. Where you put windows absolutely is critical.
Okay.
Depends on the climate 100%. Right. If you're designing a passive house in Phoenix, Arizona, every window is going to have an overhang so that it doesn't get, direct heat gain through the windows.
Right.
In Ohio, you might say, let's put that front and center on the south side so that we can get as much heat as we can in the winter.
Right.
Just depends on the site and the location.
Okay. So these are design strategies. This is very interesting because many homes have been designed with what I call a brute force internal climate maintenance strategy, which is, I lived for years in North Texas, Dallas, Richardson, that whole area. And people said, well, it's hot in the winter. I mean, it's hot in the summer. There's about 5 months where you need air conditioning. And so it's get a, 3, 4, 5 ton air conditioner and just crank up the heat and put your windows wherever you want to. Doesn't matter. Just burn the energy and this is normal behavior. Unfortunately, this is how we designed houses. If you think about how Shaker was designed, not to be specific about my house, but it's quote French Normandy design. Right.
We are in Ohio. We are not in Normandy. Right. They said, no, we want this site.
Right.
We want it to look like this.
Right.
It has to be symmetrical. The windows will be here. There's not much consideration.
Right.
And that's really how I would say that's, 98% of Shaker homes. There are some homes that have more consideration to that. Now, I would say, are there exceptions to that? Yes. And again, I go back to the pre-industrial revolution, how things were more sustainable. If an architect was designing a home, even in the days of early Shaker Heights development, would they put the larger window on the south side to warm a space? Potentially, yes, maybe they did that. But I think Shaker Heights is an example of where the classical design considerations and aesthetics mostly kind of overruled those natural tendencies that architects have to do things like put windows, put doorways, where you can get things like cross ventilation, where you can get the right amount of solar gain that you want. Unfortunately, our homes are, dealing with that today.
Part of the sustainability piece, so let's go back to your passive home example here, where you're controlling the amount of air that comes in, you're aware of things like off-gassing. Not only is that more environmentally friendly, but to the point you were making earlier, you likely are less dependent on a source of electricity or natural gas to heat and cool the property. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
So you're
or ideally, that's the goal.
That's the goal. So you're reducing your dependency, in this case, on fossil fuels, which are typically the way. I mean, there's alternate energy sources that provide electricity, and that's increasing in this country, which is a good thing. But you're less dependent on energy for the heating and cooling because you've actually designed those considerations into the residence itself, correct?
Right.
Okay. So now
we can't get rid of it, though, Mark. Unfortunately, we still
no.
We could try to live off the grid, but no. And interestingly, the push these days is for electrification of homes, and that means eliminating burning natural gas inside the home.
Right.
electrically powered equipment and appliances are generally more efficient, but they burn electricity, which is often coal. Whereas we see the natural gas line coming into our house. We know it's burning natural gas. You could argue that is, in some ways, potentially, is the natural gas more sustainable than the coal? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if we can move to more sustainable sources of electricity, then if we can achieve the electrification of homes, then our homes can truly be sustainable. So if we can use the sun or wind or some other renewable resource, water, then turning on your lights, powering your stove, turning on your heat, all can be truly sustainable. It does require getting off the natural gas, and not all appliances are up to the same level of quality, when they're electric, namely furnaces. It's hard to find a, electric heat source as powerful and efficient today. And hopefully that will change, as a natural gas fired furnace.
That's fascinating. So the sustainability not only goes to reducing the amount of energy that's required to maintain the comfort of the home. We can't eliminate it, to your point, but we can reduce it, right? But it also means shifting the kind of devices in the home that are consuming energy to bias them towards the use of electricity,
yes,
which, to your point, is increasingly being generated through renewable sources, so wind and water and sun and so forth. Okay. Now, there's also, if I understand it correctly, there's a sustainability dimension to the materials that are selected for use in a residence or a commercial structure, correct?
Absolutely. That's a major part of sustainable design for homes or commercial design. There are so many ways, different ways that materials can contribute to sustainability. So one of them is recycled content, right? Are we extracting new materials and putting a new material into our home? Are we using material that's made of something recycled? Could be recycled rubber and recycled plastic, recycled glass, concrete to some extent. Those are kind of common ways that we can use recycled products.
Right.
And everyday products that you would buy for your home can have recycled content. Actually, I just specified a flooring underlayment. Nike makes it. It's made out of recycled rubber. You can get it at Home Depot. So that's the good news is that it's becoming more mainstream. Any finishes, carpet, tile, even countertops, certainly in furnishings as well, there can be recycled content. Different other types of flooring, rubber flooring is usually made out of recycled tires. So recycled content is a big component of that. There's also the VOC aspect that we already talked about. One big part that I just want to mention is also, where do products go when you're renovating a home that you're taking out? If you're doing any work, or even if you're building a new home, there's so much waste accumulated during the construction process in packaging. So one of the things I do is just, if someone's taking out a whole kitchen, I try to find, where can this kitchen that my client happens to not like, and if I'm renovating it, I probably agree with them that they can do much better than this. But that kitchen is sometimes in perfectly good condition. The appliances they might be 20 years old, but sometimes they're in perfect working order. So if you think about that, entire kitchen will usually go into a landfill straight.
Right.
That is a huge amount of waste.
Yeah.
If we can take that and we can get it to some other facility in someone else's house, even if it has to be broken apart, and say, that's becoming a big part of projects. It's something that I try to do. Unfortunately, it's a little time consuming because, our world is not set up for doing that. There's actually a junk removal company that's starting to do that specifically. So me as the architect, I can say, okay, we're demolishing these 4 rooms. junk hauler company, can you please take all of this stuff instead of just getting a dumpster and
Right.
throwing it in and having it go to a landfill? Junk hauler company can come in and take everything, see what can be recycled, see what can go to different vendors around town, such as Habitat for Humanity Restore down in Bedford Heights, or the Rebuilders Exchange, which is a great kind of salvage architectural product store. And then what's left, and no one wants, nothing can be done with any of this material, then what's left can go into a landfill. To me, that's a big part of sustainability. And it's before anything new has even gone into the house.
Well, that's fascinating because I think that goes to the whole cycle of the use of material, right? So we have some sort of natural materials that are used to, construct, let's say, the kitchen appliances 20 years ago, right? There was some materials that were used to create the metal and all the elements that went up to that, right? And so then it was used in someone's residence for some period of time. And then to your point, somebody like you comes in and says, okay, we're going to remove that kitchen, but, this is sort of like going to a thrift store, right? Where you, people say, I'm going to go thrifting, right, for clothing. You're doing that with appliances. In effect, You're saying, well, they're perfectly good. They're capable. But my client doesn't like them because they want the latest stuff, right? Wi-Fi controls, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? So they remove them, but you say, wait a second, there's an opportunity to repurpose and reuse these, right?
Right.
Which extends their useful life.
Exactly.
And delays their arrival at
Yes.
a landfill, which to your point is kind of the last place you want to put. You don't want to put anything useful in a landfill if you can avoid it.
Absolutely.
Right.
So those appliances, for example, that come out of someone's house that are perfectly usable, but maybe they're out of style a little bit, they are very saleable, actually, and usable and functional for many other people. This is not like
Right.
the rejects that no one wants,
Right.
some broken down dishwasher. This would be a wonderful addition to someone else's kitchen.
Right.
Sometimes. Actually, on a project I had, we had a Sub-Zero refrigerator. The ice dispenser wasn't working, but 48-inch Sub-Zero refrigerator from 1995 or something.
Wow.
The plumber took it, and they've been using it in their warehouse for the past 5 years.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Yep.
Right? Because they need a refrigerator. If they hadn't taken that one that they happened to get for free from this project,
Right.
that would have been in the landfill. That's a giant mass sitting in a landfill somewhere. And they would have gone to Home Depot and bought whatever cheap refrigerator they could get.
Right.
So it's decreasing the demand for new products in turn,
Right.
which I guess is the
Which is actually a good thing.
benefit. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good thing because if you reduce the demand for new, then that's less of those resources that are consumed. And
Right.
this gets back to your original point about consumption, the book you talked about, The World of Stuff, right?
The story of stuff.
The Story of Stuff, right? This
By
is
Annie
less
Leonard.
stuff. Yeah, this is a great book. We'll put a link in
Mm-hmm.
the show notes about that. So, okay, so sustainability then goes to things like that, which is interesting. So the materials that are used, and you've given the example of the kitchen appliances, which I think is fascinating. Do clients, when they are considering sustainability in a structure, home, I know this is true of things, and we'll talk about schools in a minute. Do they think long-term about what I call the total cost of ownership? In terms of, because they're obviously, well, I say obviously, many of them will finance the property, they'll go to a mortgage bank or whatever, and they'll get a loan at whatever the interest rate is, right? But there's also the question is that once the house is paid off, or like in my case, I purchased a home that, well, like yours, mine was built in 1918, yours was built in 1908. We had somebody come in and paint the home, and they pointed out to me, they said, Mark, are you aware that all of the trim in your home, all of the trim molding, the doors, everything is all hardwood. Now, where I still live in North Texas, everything is pine. It's all pine, right?
Yeah.
It's from the piney woods of Georgia or from the Pacific Northwest. And it comes in bulk in these giant, 18-wheelers, and everything's pine, right?
Yes.
But here it was all hardwood. And I asked the guy, I said, I didn't know that. Why is that? And he said, because when these homes were built, they would often set up a mill on the property, and they would literally mill the trees that were in the woods nearby and use that for trim. And so Ohio's got a lot of hardwood trees, so they used hardwood, right? Which is amazing to me.
It is.
Right? Now, here we are in a home that's 106 years old, and the trim is made out of hardwood, which means it doesn't dent very much. I mean, it's sturdy.
It's there to last
it's
as long as
there
the home
to
is
last.
there. Yes.
Exactly right. So from a
Could
sustainability,
outlive the home. Someone could take the hardwood and reuse it somewhere else if they wanted to.
I'm sure the home will live longer than me. Right? It'll be around after I'm gone. That home hopefully will still be there, and there'll be another resident. So from a sustainability standpoint, it sounds like building structures that are designed to last, and I'm going to use a phrase here that you haven't used, but it strikes me as they're almost multi-generational, right? So
yes,
my time horizon, when I'm thinking about the property, whether it's a residence, a commercial, right, is longer than simply your 5
time
years.
there. Yes.
My time there, correct.
Yeah.
Would that be a part of sustainability?
Absolutely. We have to see ourselves as stewards of the earth first. That's the big picture, right? Then we are stewards of smaller subsets of that, including our own homes or wherever we live, even if we're renting an apartment, right? This is not just for people who own large, beautiful Shaker Heights homes. So seeing ourselves as stewards, I think we have to be realistic about that in some ways. So sometimes our tendency is to say, okay, I want to put the product that's going to last the longest. But if you put the product that lasts the longest on top of a product that doesn't last the longest, or in a home or in a design that will not withstand the test of time, does it matter that that product is still there in 200 years if the structure around it needs to be demolished anyway?
Right.
So we need to see the big picture and then focus down on the more narrow picture. And I totally agree with that. I think that's a major part of sustainability is using products that withstand the test of time. But again, I would be realistic. A water heater doesn't last forever.
Right.
Frankly, an entire kitchen doesn't last forever.
Right.
There are very few homes, again, if we talk specifically about Shaker Heights, that have the original kitchen.
Right.
The way we lived was so different then. And this is true for homes of all sizes,
Sure.
Rentals included.
Sure.
So let's be realistic too. If we tried to put in things that would only products, let's say that would last, that would be the longest lasting, sometimes it would be cost prohibitive.
Right.
And it may have other, kind of side effects that, you hadn't considered, right? It may not look as great, let's say. It may be more expensive. It may, whatever the, product is, it may have an unintended consequence. So I just think we should look at the big picture. I see a home that has lasted from 1918, 100%. Your home will outlive you, I'm sure, Mark. It'll probably outlive the next owners and maybe the owners after that, right? But I've considered this with my own home. At what point does the basic structure or the foundation just start to disintegrate? At some point, a structural engineer is going to have to look at that. And are the stones that are piled up to form the foundation of that home going to last for 200 years? Maybe.
Right. But
at some point, we'll have to really look at that kind of in more detail.
I think another thing, and this goes to the design, if you will, the workflow, or the sort of the workflow, the life flow of the home. Our home, built in 1918, did a little research about the original owners. Our neighborhood was sort of for, what to call mid-level professionals. They were people that, were probably managers, maybe junior level executives working in downtown Cleveland. And our home is not including the basement, is a 3-story home. And the 3rd story was for staff, which is kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
And they had the little bells and buzzers that you would ring, and you would call, the personal butler or whatever down to answer the front door. Okay. all of that's fascinating. It's like upstairs, downstairs, it's
Right.
like, Gosford Place, that kind of thing.
How people lived.
Yeah, how people live, right. But if you look at, as an example, the size of our kitchen, which is tiny, it's what's called a Pullman kitchen, right? If you look at the size of our bathroom, I mean, because of where we came from, we referred to it as the master bath,
Sure.
which is ludicrous because it's like a closet, right?
Right.
But that reflected the living of 1918.
Oh, yes.
Right. Today, people luxuriate in their bathrooms.
Yes.
I mean, they have these giant structures. I mean, I can tell you in Dallas, I mean, people would have hot tubs and skylights and all,
Yes.
I mean.
Gyms.
Yeah. I mean, bathing and all that stuff was like this massive sort of thing, right?
Right. It's funny, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah. And yet a Shaker home built for a mid-level executive in 1918, man, the bathroom was functional. I mean, you go in, you did your business, you took a bath, you washed your face, and you left. You closed the door. That was it, right?
Right. Yes,
So,
and that's common. That's how it was done.
yeah. So now, if I've rolled the tape forward to 2024, you go, well, does that design work for me? And the answer is, well, kind of barely, but not really. I mean, if you ask my wife, she would say, no, it needs to be bigger, and
Right.
which is how we live in 2024, right? So I think from a sustainability, I guess maybe turn us into a question is, what do we do
Sure.
with structures and, floor plans and layouts that reflect how we live in the moment we construct something, right?
Absolutely.
We can
And
make
still incorporate sustainability, right? And have it be sustainable. This is a huge question, and it's so many different ways to look at it. A couple things. I always tell people anything's possible with time and money. Number one. Also, your home has to work for you.
Right.
How it worked for someone 100 years ago is it's frankly pretty irrelevant.
Right.
Your home has to work for you, and yes, you should look at the future, of course,
Right.
and say, what can you realistically assume will be the case in the future? Let's say, for example, in some hypothetical world, the trend became to combine bedrooms. And, if let's say a family has 2 or 3 kids, and instead of having individual bedrooms, you have like one large bedroom.
Right.
Let's just pretend that was a trend right now. Should we go knocking down all of the walls, combining all the bedrooms? You have to think about, first of all, the main structure of the home. And this is 100% true and mostly relevant when it comes to kitchens and main family living spaces.
Right.
That's kind of where I see it play out today, especially in Shaker Heights and other homes. How we live today is a product of many basic functions in our families today. So it's everything from who's working, how many kids are there, who lives in the house, whether it's multi-generational, is it only, blood-related family living there, who is entering the home every day. There are such basic parameters that should inform our homes, and ultimately they have to work for us. So I tell people when they come to me and say, this is not working, usually they can't pinpoint why, and that's fine. Right. That's for me to sometimes investigate
Sure.
and help them figure out, which is wonderful. I love that part of my job. To keep something just because it was done a certain way or this existed a certain way 100 years ago, in my opinion, it really doesn't make sense. I think it's because I see how our environments affect us. I see that our environments can bring us happiness and joy. They can make our lives run so much easier. If only sometimes if it could be a mudroom. Does the mudroom have the right layout? That one thing alone can drastically impact how a family functions every single day of their lives.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Should you live with a situation that is, quote, historic for the sake of keeping something old? My opinion is no, not necessarily. Of course, you have to consider all the factors. Budget, of course, being,
Probably number one.
number one. Feasibility, of course. In Shaker Heights, we have the Architectural Board of Review. So, things like that. So, some very real constraints in addition to that. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I think people's homes can and should work for them. Again, I always look at the big picture and then narrow down to more smaller concerns. Big picture, I would look at the structure of the home. Many times, the good part is that Shaker homes and most older homes, not just specific to Shaker Heights, they were built to last. They were built using quality materials, and they're generally very sturdy. My home, for example, despite being built in 1908, actually has steel beams in it. So that's wonderful. If I go to, reorganize a bathroom layout, I can just take those walls down if I want.
Right.
Largely. Obviously, this requires a, architect or structural engineer review. It's not something anyone should go to on their own. But, you look at the overall footprint of the building. You look at the structure of the building, and then you see how can that work better.
Tell me a little bit about LEED.
Sure. So for anyone who doesn't know, LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's the most widely used green building rating system. There are many green building rating systems today, but LEED is still the most important, especially when it comes to commercial buildings. It sets a standard of sustainability that is at the same time achievable, but also remarkable, to use the name of your podcast series, in that it demonstrates a true dedication to sustainability. It measures an actual effect on the environment.
Wow.
So things like water usage reduction, energy efficiency, quality of air, impact of the site, and many other things. There can be, LEED offers, there's an innovation and credit. So for things like, let's say, a composting program, there could be, credits given for something like that. So it's kind of beyond just the building design and construction.
Right.
There's some behavioral aspects to it as well. Yeah, so it's been transformational in the industry, certainly. And again, it's mostly prevalent in the commercial design space, but it certainly is also important in residential design. And I find that in my own practice, it's really the best reference point for sustainability still to this day. Even if a project is not trying to achieve LEED certification, it's something that we use as a tool to both set goals and measure our success when it comes to sustainability.
Wow, that's interesting. I've been aware that LEED has been used because in places that I've lived before, it's not uncommon for a building that has been LEED certified to have, some sort of, signage right in the lobby or something. This is a LEED certified building and that sort of stuff. But I'm not sure, apart from the architectural community, how many people really understand the value of LEED certification.
Yeah, I think it's, in some ways, yes, it is a check mark. Right. It's for, let's say, if we're, locally speaking, right, the school building projects, we know that they have to be LEED silver. It's, in some ways, yes, we have to meet that check mark. It's also, frankly, a marketing strategy, right? If you spend all this time and money and effort trying to achieve something, it's, I don't think, wrong to put the stamp on the building, make a beautiful plaque where every person entering the building can see and say, yes, we achieved LEED, silver, gold, or platinum, right? So I think that's a good thing. Kind of celebrates it, makes it more mainstream, possibly creates a little competition. This building next door has this. What will we have over here, right?
Well, I think, though, to circle back to one of the key points you made at the beginning of the show, is that this is all this is a measurable way and a demonstration of being good stewards of the earth resources with respect to the construction of that building, or in the case of residential, if it's used as a framework to influence the design choices that the architect along with the client are making, then again, this is all a part of being a good steward.
Exactly.
Which is key.
Right. So, yes, if you ask why practice sustainability, absolutely, it's the right thing to do. Beyond that, I think, there's many measurable benefits to it as well.
Well, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. This is wonderful. I'm excited that you're doing this whole series.
I appreciate it. We'll look forward to catching up with you in the future and talking more about the topic.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I look forward to it. Take care.
I'm Mark Good. You've been listening to my Remarkable podcast. For more episodes like this, as well as premium content, visit my site, markgood.substack.com.
Humble, pride loses